We are going to be hearing a lot about the partisanship here, but let's look at this from the perspective of law. Joining us now to talk more about what is in this indictment is former Assistant U.S. Attorney Shane Stansbury. He's a distinguished fellow in the Center for Law, Ethics, and National Security at Duke Law School. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good to be here.
So based on everything that we have learned today, all this new information, how strong do you think this case is against the former president?
Well, it's an extraordinary indictment for a number of reasons. One is just the name on the indictment. We should start with that. I should also mention that it's a charging instrument. It's not evidence, so we'll have to see at trial. But it is a fulsome document that suggests a strong case. There are lots of witnesses, obviously, that the government has assembled, including Trump's own attorneys and employees. There are mentions of recordings and text messages, kind of things that are a gold to prosecutors when it comes to trial, and statements by Mr. Trump himself. We'll have to see how all this plays out. And of course, this indictment doesn't mean that it contains everything that the government has. And we can also have other developments. For example, the co-conspirator could flip.
Certainly, we are looking at a lot of charges, 37 charges. As we look at those, I assume that you have possibly a different perspective with your experience. Is there anything that stood out to you as being especially problematic for the former president?
Well, it's always problematic to be on the other side of the V when you're being prosecuted. So I used to prosecute national security cases, and the kinds of documents that are at issue here are of the highest classification, obviously the greatest sensitivity. So the case has a flavor about it that is deadly serious. When I'm looking at it from the perspective of evidence and what might come out at trial, I think one thing that stands out is the degree of alleged knowledge and personal involvement by the former president, personally reviewing the documents, directing the moving of boxes, and having discussions specifically relating to the documents. Also, as I said, you have text and recording, so it's not a sort of he said, she said type case. So pretty tight case in that regard. And there's also a coherent story, which prosecutors always want, of alleged obstruction.
Initially, when this pursuit was first announced, a lot of people were critical of the prosecution, that they had a flimsy case here. Based on what you are seeing today, do you feel that the case is stronger than some people first assumed?
As I said, you never know how strong your case is until you get to trial, because good defense attorneys will put you to the test. But certainly the allegation suggests that there's quite a bit of evidence.
We talk a lot about the max sentences here and the potential for 20 years in prison. But realistically, a case like this, with the evidence that we are seeing at this point, talking about a former president, such a high-profile person, realistically, what type of punishment with a guilty verdict in any of these are we looking at?
Well, it goes without saying that we're in uncharted waters. Certainly, we'll have to see how things play out at trial, which of the counts actually work out in the government's favor, if any. And if they do get a conviction on, for example, some of the counts relating to national defense information, I suppose the judge will probably be looking at aggravating factors like what's alleged in the indictment, the fact that some of the information was disseminated, right? So those are the kinds of facts that will play into sentencing. But again, as you said, we're talking about a former president, and it's anyone's guess as to how a judge would treat that. There's also some precedent, right, with high-level figures like David Petraeus and Sandy Berger. Those individuals accepted responsibility in those cases and received no jail time, but they'll certainly be pointed out as examples from Trump's prosecutors if we ever get that far.
Certainly. All right. Former Assistant U.S. Attorney Shane Stansbury, we really appreciate your insight and your time. Thank you, sir.
Okay, our home isn't small. That's why we have a ground mapping